Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Harvard law professor demands all colleges cancel woke diversity statements. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Well, this gentleman is a Harvard law professor and he decided he does not like diversity statements. Now, interestingly, he does have a history of racial politics. He was a supporter of Claudine Gay. He did not like how she was removed. He's also written some books, one of which, at least, I can't even tell you the title of, but I can hint at the title, because it's just that racial. But in addition to this professor, the Washington Post is also calling on all colleges to drop diversity statements. Coming from the Washington Post, the problem with diversity statements and what to do about them. DEI statements have too often led to self-censorship and ideological policing. What do you mean too often led to? That's what it is. It's a list of screening questions. If you don't fit exactly what they want you to be ideologically and politically, you will not get the job. That's what a diversity statement is. These have also been used in colleges, which is already a completely inappropriate thing to do. But it applies to students. It applies to guest speakers. It's an abusive tool to screen people out that don't think and act the way they want them to think and act. Randall Kelly is the professor asking for the change. He's a professor at Harvard Law School where he teaches courses on contracts, criminal law, and the regulation of race relations. He served as a law clerk for Judge Skelly Wright of the United States Court of Appeals and for Justice Thurgood Marshall of the United States Supreme Court. He's a member of the Bar of the District of Columbia and the Supreme Court of the United States. He also wrote this article in the London Review of Books about Claudine Gay getting fired. Browbeating by Randall Kelly on the campaign against Claudine Gay. The forced resignation of Harvard University President Claudine Gay on January 2nd capped a ferocious and extremely effective campaign of intimidation and misrepresentation. Without getting into this article too deeply, he doesn't like how Claudine Gay was taken down. But truth be told, she was a criminal. She was discriminatory against other students, against other professors. She was a tremendous problem for the university. The plagiarism uncovered in the investigation of her scholarly work was enough that she should have been embarrassed, she should have apologized, and she should have been nowhere near Harvard after this happened, or when it began. Yet they still gave her a great position, paying her a fortune of money with tons of benefits, and let her stay at the university. But Randall Kelly wanted her to stay. However, when it comes to DEI statements, that's where the professor draws the line. From the Harvard Crimson, mandatory DEI statements are ideological pledges of allegiance. Time to abandon them. Well, they always were ideological pledges of allegiance. And this gentleman is extremely intelligent. He has an extensive background in law. You don't get to work anywhere near the Supreme Court if you're not highly intelligent. And I can only assume that it's become more and more apparent that if they continue to push this ideological nonsense with DEI and the diversity statements, they're going to get more people looking into the work of people in important positions who have committed quite a bit of plagiarism. Additionally, the public has had it with diversity statements and DEI. So now it's time to roll it all back. Here's his argument. On a posting for a position as an assistant professor in international and comparative education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, applicants are required to submit a resume, a cover letter, a research statement, 3 letters of reference, 3 or more writing samples, and a statement of teaching philosophy that includes a description of their, quote, orientation towards diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. At Harvard and elsewhere, hiring for academic jobs increasingly requires these so-called diversity statements, which Harvard's Derek Bach Center for Teaching and Learning describes as being, quote, about your commitment to furthering EDIB within the context of institutions of higher education. By requiring academics to profess and flaunt faith in DEI, the proliferation of diversity statements poses a profound challenge to academic freedom. Yes, it completely erases academic freedom. It always did. Even the idea of proposing diversity statements, even to support the United States. Like when we were kids and we were in school, we put our hand on our heart and we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I mean, that might have been a good thing for us. But even that does limit free speech. Okay for children, but even that does limit free speech. I'm for that when it comes to children. When it comes to adults, no. Come in, get in there based on your merit, and let's see what you can do if we're giving you a job. A closer look at the Box Center's page on diversity statements illustrates how diversity statements destroy academic freedom. For the purpose of showcasing attentiveness to DEI, the Center suggests answering questions such as, quote, how does your research engage with and advance the well-being of socially marginalized communities? Do you know how the following operate in the academy? Implicit bias, different forms of privilege, settler colonialism, systemic and interpersonal racism, homophobia, heteropatriarchy, and ableism? How do you account for the power dynamics in the classroom, including your own positionality and authority? How do you design course assessments with EDIB in mind? How have you engaged in or led EDIB campus initiatives or programming? And in case you're like me and you're wondering what exactly is EDIB, because these guys make up acronyms left, right, and center, well, on this page from the Harvard Office for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, you've got your answer. It's equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. It's the same thing as diversity, equity, and inclusion. They just throw in the word belonging now to throw you off the trail a little bit, but they're not going to fool us. We know what you guys are doing. The Box Center's how-to page mirrors the expectation that DEI statements will essentially constitute pledges of allegiance that enlist academics into the DEI movement by dint of soft-spoken but real coercion. If you want the job or the promotion, play ball or else. I mean, I got you, Randall, but did you just realize this now? Because most of us, when we saw what the diversity statements were when they first came out, noticed right away these are highly inappropriate and don't belong in any professional organization. College, place of business, nonprofit, you name it. You should not have diversity statements there. Playing ball entails affirming that the DEI bureaucracy is a good thing and asking no questions that challenge it, all the while making sure to use in one's attestations the easy-to-parody DEI lingo. And we can see when Randall says the easy-to-parody DEI lingo, he's pointing out to his friends, hey, look, they got us. This is too easy. Chris Rufo is out there taking people down one after another. We've got to back this train up. In addition to exerting pressure towards the leftist conformity, the process of eliciting diversity statements abets cynicism. Detractors reasonably suspect that underneath the uncontroversial aspirations for diversity statements, facilitating a more open and welcoming environment for everyone, are controversial goals, including the weeding out of candidates who manifest opposition to or show insufficient enthusiasm for the DEI regime. Detractors also reasonably object to what they see as a troubling invitation to ritualize dissembling. A cottage industry of diversity statement counseling has already emerged to offer candidates prefabricated boilerplate rhetoric. Of course, you've always had that with resumes as well. There are resume services that will write your resume for you. You pay them a fee, they give you a great resume. Diversity statements are even easier. They're obviously just looking for a few keywords. You could Google it right now, I'm sure, and find very cheap services for lots of diversity statements. Candidates for academic positions at Harvard should not be asked to support ideological commitments. Imagine the howl of protest that would, or should, erupt if a school at Harvard asked the candidate for a faculty position to submit a statement of their orientation work towards capitalism, or patriotism, or making America great again, with a clear expectation of allegiance. Such pressure constitutes an encroachment upon the intellectual freedom that ought to be part of the enjoyment of academic life. He continues, demands for DEI statements are also counterproductive to efforts to undo the effects of long overlooked, invidious social discriminations in academia. It is important to remember that the DEI ethos did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from a laudable determination to free academia of attitudes and practices that impeded potential contributors for prejudicial reasons, thereby depriving institutions of higher learning of useful talents. Well, we don't agree there, and it's fine to make excuses for people, and maybe that makes it more saleable to the people that are decision makers here to say, sure, we'll get rid of these nonsensical DEI statements and we'll try to push out DEI from our policies and practices. But it was evil when it began. And there were always opportunities for merit, especially in more recent years. We've had a Black Supreme Court justice for several decades now. How did that happen? It was merit. It was no accident. Universities are under a legal, moral, and pedagogical duty to take action against wrongful discriminatory conduct. But demands for mandatory DEI statements venture far beyond that obligation into territory that is full of booby traps inimical to an intellectually healthy university environment. By overreaching, by resorting to compulsion, by forcing people to toe a political line, by imposing ideological litmus tests, by incentivizing insincerity, and creating a circular mode of discourse that is seemingly impervious to self-questioning, the current DEI regime is discrediting itself. It would be hard to overstate the degree to which many academics at Harvard and beyond feel intense and growing resentment against the DEI enterprise because of features that are perhaps most evident in the demand for DEI statements. He says, "I am a scholar on the left committed to struggles for social justice. The realities surrounding mandatory DEI statements, however, make me wince. The practice of demanding them ought to be abandoned, both at Harvard and beyond. Randall, you should have spoken up sooner. If you care about people's rights, you have to care about all human rights. Two wrongs never make a right." My dad taught me that one a long time ago. The left knew better, and now they're in panic mode. What they were hoping to have happen was to get to a point of full tyranny. In full tyranny, you don't have to worry about what people think of your practices. You don't have to worry about getting embarrassed with all of your plagiarism. And I don't think Randall has any plagiarism. I'm talking about the other recent DEI administrators getting busted by people like Chris Rufo for all of their plagiarism. But in a full tyranny, you get away with anything. They thought they'd get away with anything, and they didn't. And that's why they're panicking, and that's why even the Washington Post is backpedaling. By the editorial board, this isn't just an opinion. This is the editorial board. So this is the view of the Washington Post. And about the editorial board, editorials represent the views of the Post as an institution, as determined through discussion among members of the editorial board, based in the opinion section and separate from the newsroom. So they don't consider this news, but they consider this their editorial view collectively. Here's what they have to say. The problem with diversity statements and what to do about them. DEI statements have too often led to self-censorship and ideological policing. And too often would be like, 100% of the time. This is what happens when you set out to take over a country, install a tyranny, create a set of rules for one skin color versus another skin color, and then you fail. You get backpedaling. As the United States reckoned with racial inequality during and after the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests and riots, many saw diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as a way to address the issues in higher education. As part of the trend, many schools began requiring candidates for teaching positions to submit DEI statements. Potential hires explain how they would advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in their teaching and research activities. One 2021 study found about 1/3 of job postings at elite universities required them. Now, however, some in academia are starting to express second thoughts about this practice. In April, Harvard Law School professor Randall L. Kelly, that's this guy, urged abolition of DEI statements, arguing that they amount to compulsion and ideological litmus tests. Not long after Mr. Kennedy's article appeared, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, became the first top university to voluntarily end their use. The decision came after extensive consultations among all 6 of the school's academic deans. MIT's president, Sally Kornbluth, explained, "Well, we can build an inclusive environment in many ways, but compelled statements impinge on freedom of expression, and they don't work." In doing away with DEI statements, MIT was not abandoning the goals of greater diversity, equity, and inclusion, which remain not only valid, but also vital. DEI programs can have an important place. They should not be abolished or undermined, as red states such as Florida and Texas have done, by forbidding the use of state funds for DEI in public universities. Yes, they absolutely should all be abolished in every state, in every corner of the United States and its protectorates. Literally everywhere, anywhere that the United States has any authority, we should abolish DEI or any opposite version of DEI that creates discrimination against certain races. They continue. Reshaping universities via such a heavy-handed use of state power could set a dangerous precedent for academic freedom more generally. It shouldn't even be necessary for states like Florida and Texas, Iowa, Wyoming, Alabama, multiple states who now have gone in and ripped out these horrendous DEI programs and the diversity statements and pronoun usage and nonsense like that. But because you have people who don't have respect for America and don't have respect for American values, it was necessary to use state power to rein in these ridiculous programs. And in particular, you want the state to pay for it with state funds or federal funds through the state? I don't think so. And yet, as a specific policy, DEI statements advance their declared objectives at too high a cost. In fact, they stuck with Mr. Kennedy as a self-described scholar on the left, who formerly served as a law clerk for Justice Thurgood Marshall. He is absolutely no dummy, this guy. He knew what the game was. He was part of the game until it became obvious, hey, someone needs to kind of speak out and get us out of this game before we really get in trouble. Because guys like Chris Rufo, Bill Ackman, and other people are going after their scholarly work. Randall's got nothing to worry about, but he knows damn well a lot of these administrators in DEI at colleges do have a lot to worry about. I don't think even with pulling back DEI statements and DEI programs, Chris Rufo's people are going to stop. They're going to get rid of all these people that are in positions of power but did not earn it because they plagiarized their scholarly work. We're going to ride the destruction of Marxism and communism in our country through this DEI nonsense all the way to the end on this channel. Not surprisingly, 90% of self-described conservative faculty view the statements as political litmus tests, but so do more than 50% of moderates and even 1/4 of liberals, according to a survey by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a nonpartisan watchdog group specializing in campus free speech issues. Because the criteria for acceptable DEI statements are often vague, job seekers must do the work of anticipating ideological and political preferences of university administrators and faculty who are disproportionately left-leaning. The MIT Communications Lab, for example, explained that a diversity statement is an opportunity to show that you care about the inclusion of many forms of identity in academia and in your field, including but not limited to gender, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, and ability status, and notes it may be appropriate to acknowledge aspects of your own marginalized identity and/or your own privilege. Harvard University's Bach Center for Teaching and Learning included a list of guiding questions, including, do you seek to identify and mitigate how inequitable and colonial social systems are reinforced in the academy by attending to and adjusting the power dynamics in your courses? Great question. I was wondering the same thing. Yet job seekers who disagree with the ideological premises of such inquiries have an overwhelming incentive to suppress their true beliefs or pretend to have the right ones, lest they be eliminated from consideration. It's a dilemma, especially given the high stakes. As the University of California at Davis's vice chancellor for DEI explained, quote, in these searches, it is the candidate's diversity statement that is considered first. Only those who submit persuasive and inspiring statements can advance for complete consideration. In one faculty search at University of California at Berkeley, around 75% of applicants were screened out of consideration, irrespective of criteria such as teaching ability and research skills. You'd think teaching ability would have something to do with whether or not they hired you for a teaching position. Not at that college. Small wonder that many applicants engage in what Daniel Sargent, a history professor at UC Berkeley, calls performative dishonesty. The last thing academia or the country needs is another incentive for people to be insincere or dishonest. The very purpose of the university is to encourage a free exchange of ideas, seek the truth wherever it may lead, and to elevate intellectual curiosity and openness among both faculty and students. Whatever their original intent, the use of DEI statements has too often resulted in self-censorship and ideological policing. Fundamentally reconsidering them could actually strengthen DEI by placing it on a more sustainable basis, intellectually and politically. MIT is one of the first to tackle the issue. Here's hoping it won't be the last. And it won't be the last. They'll all follow this because diversity statements, DEI programs, all of this was part of an agenda to install a tyranny. They came pretty close, but it looks like it's not working. They had momentum while they were abusing as much power as they could, but then ultimately they ran out of power. And you have people out there like Chris Rufo, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and others pointing out how many of these people, not Randall necessarily, but how many of these people are actually frauds, didn't do their research, didn't earn their positions, stole other people's scholarly work, submitted it as their own. They're all hung out to dry. The work they submitted is published. It's public. It can't be hidden. It can't be corrected. It's too late now. So all of these people will still be identified by people like Chris Rufo and his team, Bill Ackman, who funded a group who's looking at MIT, who's looking at other schools. They will identify the people that don't belong in these positions, that didn't earn their positions, and they will force them out of those positions, just like Chris Rufo did with Claudine Gay. Diversity statements at colleges are obviously on the way out, or the editorial board of the Washington Post wouldn't be supporting Randall Kennedy, calling for colleges and universities to remove them. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.